Welcome everyone, Himanshu here. In this video, we are going to create this project, caching proxy, which is hosted at roadmap.sh website. Let's look at the requirements of the project. We need to build a caching server that caches response from other servers. For example, if someone sends any request to our server, we send request to some other service, and if we get the same request again, then instead of sending request to another service again, we just return the cached response. This is similar to how we did that weather service, cached weather service project. So this is similar to that. So now let's look at the requirements. Users should be able to start the caching proxy server by running a command like the following: caching proxy, then port. This is the port where caching proxy server will run, and then the origin. Origin will be the upstream service where they want to send the request. And for example, they can start the caching proxy using this command. Now here our caching proxy server will run on port 3000, and the actual server where they want to send request or from where they want to get the resources is this dummyjson.com. So for example, taking the above example, if user makes a request localhost 3000 products, the caching proxy server should forward the request to dummyjson.com/products and return the response along with headers, and it needs to cache the response, so that next time when we get the same request, we just return the response from the cache. And along with the response, we need to return one thing, which is a new header called xcache. Its value will be hit if we are returning from the cache, or miss if the response is not in the cache. Now if the same request is made again, the caching proxy server should return the cached response instead of forwarding the request to the server. You should also provide a way to clear the cache by running the command like following. So users should be able to clear the cache of proxy server as well. We will build this project in 3 steps. In the first step, we will not build any cache. We will redirect, or we will get the response for all requests from the upstream server. In the second part, we will build an in-memory cache, and in the third part, we will build cache using Redis. So let's get started. So as always, we will use Java and Spring to build our project, and we will use Spring Initializer to create a Spring Boot project. I have mentioned the details, all these parameters required to create the project, and I have added only one dependency, Spring Web. So I have downloaded the zip file and unzipped it, and I am inside the directory caching proxy. Let's open it in an IDE. I will use IDEA, and yeah. Now let's see. So the IDE is still importing the project. It is done. Now let me show you the dependencies. So we have Spring Boot Starter Web and Spring Boot Starter Test dependencies, and we have this JUnit dependency as well. Now our application will require few environment variables or few configurations. Now we could directly put the configurations in let's say main resources application.properties file, but it is always a good practice to externalize the configuration. There are a lot of solutions. The simple solution is to use environment variables. Now here I don't want to set the environment variables in my computer. What we can do is we can create a new file. I will create a new file called .env, and now this file can contain the environment variables. But now whenever we need to run this application using IDE, we need to specify this file. So I will just go here and I will modify run configuration. And generally I store the run configuration as project file. We need to select the .env file. I will refresh. Now since .env file has dot prefix, it sometimes it is not displayed here. You can select any file, then replace the name with .env and apply. Now whenever we run this application using this run button, then whatever environment variables are specified in .env file will be picked up. Now let's see which environment variable we need right now. So right now obviously we need to send request to some upstream server. So we need to specify that server's URL. So let's do that. In the application.properties file, I will call it let's say proxy.upstream.server.host. So this is the host or base URL, whatever you call it. And now we can pick anything. So here they have mentioned dummyjson.com, but I don't think this is a real website. I will use something else, which is JSON placeholder website. So this one, JSON placeholder.typecode.com. I will copy this URL and I can put that URL directly here, but I will put it in .env file, and I will read this from environment variables. Let's call it proxy upstream server host. Now I guess if you specify this environment variable, then you don't even need to include this line. You can directly refer this property in your files wherever you want to use it, because Spring will replace this underscore with dot and will lowercase these one if required. Let's create this variable in .env file, and its value will be not this one. This one, JSON placeholder.typecode.com, and I will remove this slash at the end of the URL. Now we have this environment variable set. Now let's create the proxy. So I will create a new package first, and here let me call it proxy, and here I will create a new class. Let's call it HTTP proxy. Now this proxy will be an interface, because we will have many implementation of this interface. Now this will have one method called get method. We can call it this method anything. I will call it get. Let's do that, and this will return an HTTP response. So there is this HTTP response from java.net.http. We can use this one. Now since we want to be flexible how we respond back to the user, so we don't know what will be the content type beforehand, so I will just use byte array, and let's call it get, and it will take URL. So let me call it URL. And there will be another method which is to clear the cache. So that will just void clear. So this will just clear the cache. Now there should be some implementation of it, obviously. Now let's create one controller here. In the proxy, I can create a new controller. Let's create a new package called web. Inside web, I will create a new Java class. Call it HTTP proxy controller, and this will be a REST controller. And this will this will have one get mapping, and so this mapping will be everything. Yep. So for example, let's say localhost and products. This will also be for localhost 8080, let's say products 1 or localhost 8080 whatever. So this should accept all the paths, so we cannot just directly do this, like let's say something path. In this case it doesn't work for multiple slashes, so we need to have double star here so that it will accept all the paths. Let me call it public void get. This will take HTTP servlet request. Let me call it request and HTTP servlet response. Now using the git this request, we need to figure out what is the path. So because we have not specified any path variable or anything, we cannot directly access any path variable here, but we have the request, and request contains everything. Using the request, you can get the requested path, method, headers, any cookies or anything. Now let's get request URI. So this will be the path. So this for first request, this will be /products. For second one, this will be /product/1. For third one, this will be like whole part. And let me call it request URI. Now this is the request URI, but now we need to actually construct the URL where we actually want to send the request. We have specified the upstream servers host, so we can use that. Now let me copy this one here, and I will have one value annotation. Let me call it private string upstream server host. Now our URL will be upstream server host plus this request URI. So now we need now we can send request there and we can get back the response. Now we will use this one, this interface. We will inject this one instance of this HTTP proxy inside controller. So let's do that. Private, let's say final HTTP proxy, and I can just say HTTP proxy and I will add constructor parameter proxy.get, and URL will be upstream this host plus request URI, and we will get back this HTTP response back. Now we cannot directly return HTTP response here because HTTP response is an interface. If we go here, this is an interface, and this does not extend serializable or anything. So we don't know whether its implementation which we will receive back will be serializable or not. In that case, we cannot directly return this HTTP response. If you try to return that, you will get back some errors. What we need to do is we need to actually change this response which we have, and if you just change it, then this will be returned back to the user. Let's do that. I will create a method here, private void copy, I will copy this HTTP response. So HTTP response. I will say and to response. Let me do byte here. Now first of all we need to copy the status code. So response dot set status which will be response dot status code. Then another thing which we need is headers. We will go through the headers of that res and copy them to response. So let's do that. Res dot headers dot we have map for each. Now we have key and value, key values. Now this map is a map of string to list of string, because as you know that one key in headers, one key can have multiple values. There can be multiple headers with the same key. So that's why this is a list of strings. We'll do response dot add header. Now this takes string and value, or like is there something called set header something? Set header. This also takes name and value. We will use add header because there can be multiple. And now we need to iterate over that values as well. So values dot for each and value is response dot add header key value. So we have copied the headers. Now after that we need to copy the body as well. So response dot I can say get writer dot write, and we can write, this is character, so if you want to writer get output stream dot write, and we can write the bytes, that will be res dot body. Now this returns IO exception. Do that. Now here we will copy it. Copy res to response, and we will propagate this error for now. But in reality, you need to actually catch the error, and you need to handle the error. You should not just throw the exception to the user. So basically, you can have some REST this REST controller advice which can handle this error and can return like something went wrong or some other thing to the user. Now this is complete, but we have not injected anything here. So we don't have any instance of HTTP proxy in Spring context. Let's do that. Let's create one implementation. Now here inside proxy only, I will create a new Java class, and let's call it direct HTTP proxy, and this will implement HTTP proxy. Now here I will implement the methods. Okay, I will cancel it for now. Now this HTTP proxy, this clear method will be a default one here. So we are marking this as optional implementation. If you want to implement, you can implement, otherwise you can leave it as it is. So let's say if some HTTP proxy doesn't have anything to do with cache, then it doesn't make sense to implement clear method. So in that case, now we have only one compulsory method to implement, which is get. Now this direct HTTP proxy will use something called HTTP client to send the HTTP request to some other service. Let's do that. Private final HTTP client, and let's do constructor injection or something. You can add constructor parameter, but I will just initialize it in constructor. So HTTP client dot new HTTP client, that works. So this is HTTP client which we can use here. Let's use that. HTTP client dot send, we can send the request. Now we need HTTP request, so we can create HTTP request dot new builder, and in the new builder we can provide the URL URI dot create URL dot build, new builder. Okay, second argument, let me give it null for now. Says fraction, we can just surround with try catch. Now new builder must accept something, this URI create from URL. So this accept one URL. Now we have the request. Now along with the request we need to pass some response body handler as well, which will handle the body coming in the response. Now there are already some request body handlers already provided. Something called, what was the parameter type? Put body handler. So body handlers dot of byte array. So if you look at here, this returns a body handler byte, that returns a body subscriber. So basically this body handler will handle the in body of the incoming response and create a byte array. And what's its return type? Let me where its return type is HTTP response byte, and I will response, and I will just return it. So I can just return it here. And here, okay. So that is it. We have created one implementation. Now we can directly annotate it with @service or @component. But what I would like to do is, I would like to create a project config file. Let's create a new Java class, config dot project config. Now this will be configuration, and here I will create a bean. So bean, and its return type will be HTTP proxy. Let me call it HTTP proxy, and the new direct HTTP proxy. That is it. Now let's run the application and see what happens. The application has started, and on a new tab, localhost 8080. Now let's send the request to, first let's see what else we can try here. So we can try to do one. Let's send to do one. Yeah, and we got back the response. So now let's see whether we got back the response which we are getting from the actual JSON placeholder .typecode.com or not. If I say this, then you can see we are getting back all the responses which are available there. Let's try to send a request which will return status code other than 200, let's say BCD. In that case, we are getting 404 and we are getting other responses as well. So for example, X content type options, X powered by X rate limit, and few other things. So we are getting all these things back. So that is direct HTTP proxy. So here we are not doing anything. We are just receiving the URL and we are sending that URL to upstream server. We are getting back the response and sending the response to the user. Now let's create another implementation of HTTP proxy, which will be in-memory cache. Let's do that. I will create a new Java class inside cache package and let's call it in-memory HTTP proxy, and this will implement HTTP proxy. Let's implement the methods. Let's implement get method for now. We will return clear method as well for this implementation. Now this is a caching HTTP proxy, so it should basically only deal with cache part. It should not have to worry about how to send the request to external upstream server and get back the response, because we already have one implementation for that. So caching proxy will assume that there is already one implementation of HTTP proxy which doesn't deal with cache, or which may deal with cache, it doesn't care, and which handles the responsibility to send the request to the upstream server. So now we need to inject one HTTP proxy here. So private final HTTP proxy, and we can just call it HTTP proxy, and I will add constructor parameter. Now since this is in memory, so we can just create one map. I will create a map string and this will be HTTP response. So this is just key value pair and I will call it cache. Now since this class and this the instance of this same class will be used across multiple requests that are in multiple threads, so we need one implementation of map which is like thread safe. So we can use concurrent hash map, and we can use concurrent hash map. So first of all, I will search in the cache. Let me create one logger here. Final logger equal to logger factory dot get logger. Now let's do that. Logger dot, I'll say info, or you can say getting response for URL. Now here first of all we will check whether the response corresponding to this URL already exists in the cache or not. Let's do that. So if cache dot contains key URL, then let me say logger dot info and cache miss for, sorry, this is cache hit, not a miss. So cache hit for this URL, and now we can just return cache dot get URL. Otherwise we need to use this HTTP proxy, and generally if like one object tries to use another object of the same type, then that another object is called delegate. So I will also use the same word here. I will rename it to since it will delegate its responsibility there. So let me rename it. I have renamed it to delegate. Now if the URL does not exist in the cache, then we will use delegate to get the response. So we will just say delegate.get, and this is the response. We will put this response in the cache. So cache.put URL and response, and let's return the response back. Now here I will log that there is a cache miss. So logger.info cache miss 4 given URL. Okay, let me restart the application, and here I will send some request. First of all, I will send this request only, and okay, so it won't work obviously because we have not created an instance of InMemory HTTP proxy. Let's do that. I will go to project config, and we have one bean here. Now I will create another bean, and HTTP proxy, I will say cache HTTP proxy, and return new InMemory HTTP proxy. Now this InMemory HTTP proxy takes another HTTP proxy. Let me give it proxy, and this proxy will be injected here. Proxy. Now I will make this bean primary, and I will restart the application. Now if we made this bean primary, then while creating this bean itself, it will search for another bean with this type HTTP proxy, and it will find this bean, and that will be injected here. But the controller will find this bean because this is a primary. Let's send this request. Now we can say getting response for this URL and cache miss for this URL. If I send this request again, then getting response, and now it is cache hit. You can see that the response is also quick. But if we send something else, for example to do 1, then again it took some time and it is cache miss. Send again, it is cache hit. So that is it. But if we go to requirements, we need to send these headers back, X cache hit or X cache miss, depending on whether this is cache hit or miss. So let's do that. And here, so what you might want to do is, if I go to this one, we might try to modify the response, or sorry, headers in this response, but that will not work because this is immutable. What you need to do is you need to create another class which implements HTTP response. We will do that. So in the case, I will create a new Java class, and I will call it cast HTTP response, and this will implement HTTP response. Now let's say that we can give this T here and this T here as well, and we can implement these methods. We need to implement all of these methods, but this can take another HTTP response, so we will do just that. Now private final HTTP response T delegate, and it will take another parameter or variable, which will be whether this cache response is cached or not. That means whether it is a cache miss or cache hit. So private final boolean cached, and both of these will be constructor parameter. delegate and cache. Now for status code, we can just return delegate.status code. For HTTP request, we can just delegate.request, and for previous response as well, we can return that as it is, delegate.previous response. For headers, we will change headers, we will come to that later. For body, we can just return delegate.body. For SSL session, we have delegate session. For URI and for version as well, version. Now let's implement like how we want to return the headers, because we don't just want to return the headers of the delegate, we want to create new headers and then return them. So for that, now we have two headers. So for example, delegate dot header, and I will call map here, map, and we can say original headers. Then we can create another headers. I will say again where map string list string cache headers, and this will be map dot of, its value will be x cache, and its its key will be x cache, value will be hit or miss. So let's create one variable, private string get cache value, and I will say if it is cached, the value is hit, otherwise value is miss. And let's put this key as well in the constant, private static final string as header key equal to x cache, and this is x cache. So we will change it to cache header key, and the value will be list of get cache value, or let's rename it. This is not get cache value, get cache header value, get cache header value. So now we have two maps. So first of all, we need to combine those two maps. Let's do that. I can say where combine headers equal to new hash map, and combined headers dot total original headers and dot total cached headers. So now we need to return the headers. So we have map. Now from map we can create the headers. So as http headers dot of combined headers. It required map string list string, but we have hash map of object. Okay, let me change it. String list string. Expected two arguments, header map and filter. Yeah, so the filter is filter gives us filter is a predicate. We receive key and value, and we determine whether we need to include this header or this key value in the final headers or not. So here we want to include, so key value, and I will just say true. So we want to include everything. So this is the HTTP headers. Now the cache will return this cached HTTP response instead of direct HTTP response. So let's do that. I will go to InMemory HTTP proxy. Now here, if cache contains the URL, then we will return this one. But here we won't return this cache.get URL. For example, first of all, let's create this one, HTTP response and byte response. Response equal to this one, and another variable will be, let's say, boolean cached equal to false. But if it is inside cache, then cached will be true. Otherwise it is cache miss, and then the response will be delegate.get URL. Then we will put it inside cache. Now here, instead of returning this response, we will return new cached HTTP response, and we will provide delegate. Delegate will be response, and whether it is cached or not. So that is inside this cached. Let's restart the application, and yep, I will go here. I will send this request again. It took some time, and you can see X cache miss header is in the headers. If I send the same request again, now X cache is hit, and in the log as well we can see that there is a cache hit for this URL. Similarly, if I send another one, let's say 2 here. In this case, this is cache miss, but if we send it again, it's cache hit. Let's send for to-dos 1 again till it is cache hit. So that is fine. That is working as expected. Now let's implement the functionality to clear the cache. I will just go to this controller again. Now here as well, I will create one post mapping here. Post mapping to some endpoints, and that will clear the cache. So let's do that. Post mapping, and I will just call it cache clear, and void clear cache. I will just do this dot proxy dot clear, nothing else. Now no one has implemented that. Let's go to InMemory HTTP proxy and implement another method. Alright, public void clear. Now in this case, I will just do dot cache dot clear. So clear method will clear all the key value pairs from the hash map, and I will restart the application. Now let's send this request again. We have cache miss. Send it again. We have cache hit. We have cache hit. Now let's empty the cache. Curl post post @0 cache clear. Cache has been cleared, hopefully. Now let's send this to-dos 1 again, and we can see X cache miss. Here as well, cache miss. So that is fine. That is working. Now in the next step, we will use Redis for our cache database. Now we have already seen how to use Redis cache in cached weather service. So I will just refer to that repository. I will go to GitHub and this one, and something called weather API. First of all, you can go here, Spring Data Redis, and here you can go to learn reference documentation, and here you can find everything related to Redis and Spring, which you need to know. So here we have a section of getting started, drivers, connection modes, Redis template, and many of the things. I highly recommend you going through the documentation. That is the best way to learn. And now, first of all, I will run the Redis inside container. For that, I have composed YAML file. I will just copy it, and here I will create a new file. Call it compose.yml. Now this will start a Redis service. I will rename this caching proxy Redis. Now after that, I will I will spin up the Redis container. Docker compose up d. Yeah, it is working. Now the next thing is to we need to use some environment variable for Redis. So those are specified in .env file. But if we go to src main and resources, here we have these variables. I will just copy them and paste them in application.properties. Now these are the variables used for caching. We need to create 3 environment variables: Redis host, Redis port, and this I will just say cache duration seconds, and here as well cache duration seconds. So these are the 3 properties. I will create these properties in .env file. Yep. Now Redis host will be localhost. Redis port is 6379, I guess. Yep, 6379. And cache duration seconds. So this is the number of seconds for which the particular entry will be valid in the cache. Let's give it 60 seconds for now, so that it's easier to demo. Otherwise, we would keep it very high. Let's say 1 hour or 12 hours or 1 day, something like that. Now, with that, the next thing is we need to create Redis connection factory. For that, I guess inside cache there is this cache configuration. Let me create that. So inside cache, or to create a new Java class inside Redis package, configuration, and this will be configuration. Now here I will just copy them. But again, I highly recommend you to go through the documentation, because that's the best way to learn. Okay, but we forgot to do one thing. We forgot to add Spring Data Redis dependency. So if I search for Redis search and query Spring Data Redis, this is what we need. Then I will go to explore, build.gradle.kts, and this is the dependency which we need. I will add this dependency .gradle.kts, reload the project, and now these have been imported. So basically there are 2 libraries to interact with Redis using Java, Lettuce or JDs. So we are using lattice here, but you can use JDs if you want. Now after this, we need to create our class. So let's go inside this class only, and I will create a new Java class, and let me call it Redis, and Redis class HTTP proxy. This one, yeah, this will implement HTTP proxy. Now let's implement the method get method. This will also return this HTTP response, and it will receive an URL. Now similar to in-memory HTTP HTTP proxy, here also we will get one delegate. So private final, this will be HTTP proxy, and I will say delegate. Also, in order to interact with Redis, we need something called Redis template. Let's do that. Final Redis template. Now this takes two things. What is the type of key and value? So key is a string and value is HTTP response. So let's just store byte, and yeah, and let's call it template or cache. I will just call it cache. Now we need to create a constructor, add constructor parameters, but we won't get this template in constructor parameter. We will get something called Redis connection factory, and which we created here. Let me close everything. In the Redis connects configuration, we created Redis connection factory. We will get that. So factory, and I will say this dot cache equal to new Redis template, and this dot cache dot set connection factory. So that is it, and we have some error here. Yep. So now we have two things. Now here the principles will be same. So if I go to in-memory HTTP proxy here, I can just copy and paste this code. Let me do that. First of all, I will this one. And this will be Redis. Just cache HTTP proxy. Now I can just this one. Obviously, we will need to tweak it a bit for it to work. Yep. Now let's do that. So in the Redis, let's create two methods here, two convenient methods to get the value for a given key and put key value pair in their cache. So private will be HTTP response byte, and get from cache, let me call it URL, and it will just return cache dot ops for value dot get key or URL. Another is, let's say, private void put into cache string URL response byte, and return, or we don't return anything, cache dot for value dot set. Now we need to set key and value. So key will be URL, value will be response, and the third thing is the cache expiry. So what should be the duration for this key and value in the cache? Now we already have one environment variable and thing here. So go to application to property. We have cache duration seconds. Let me use it, and I will go here and I will use this property value private int cache duration seconds, and we can just use that. So from that variable we can create a new duration object, duration dot of seconds, cache duration in seconds. Now this key, this entry in the cache will be valid for 60 seconds as per our current configuration, but that can be changed using environment variables. So now we have two methods, one to get from the cache, one to put into cache. So here this response will be get from cache using the URL, and cached will be response is not equal to null. If response is null, then cached will be false, otherwise cached will be true. So now we can replace this with response is not null. So if response is not null, don't need to do this. In that case, we say cache hit, and then response equal to cache.get. So we don't need to do cache.get as well because response is already there. Otherwise, we log this message. Now response will be delegate.get, and this will be put into cache URL and response. And then we will return new cached HTTP response, the response, and this cached one. Now let's restart, but before restarting it, go to project config, and now here instead of returning InMemory HTTP proxy, we will return that Redis cache. So it will be Redis cache HTTP proxy, and this need two things, and one this delegate proxy and another is Redis connection factory. So let's do that factory, and we can directly inject this factory here. Let's restart the application, and we have some error. What is the error? Since we modified the environment.env file, so in order for that to take effect, we need to run it from here. Here now it is working. So let's try to send a request. I will send this request here, and we got some exception, internal server error, and here we got some exception. Let's see. Template not initialized, call after properties set. Okay. So we need to call after properties set in here. Restart it, send the request again. Now we are again getting some error. Default serializer requires a serializer payload but received an object of type HTTP response IMPL. So this HTTP response IMPL, this does not implement the serializable, so we cannot use it. So either we need to create a new serializable, or what we can do is, since in the response we don't need everything, we just need the status code, headers, and the body, and request URL as well if you want to keep that, but that is not strictly required. So what we can do is we can create our own implementation of HTTP response again, similar to what we have did for a cached HTTP response. So you might think that we can just store cached HTTP response, but since cached HTTP response need another HTTP response, which will be this implementation, this HTTP response IMPL, which is not serializable. So again, you will get the same error. So in this case, it is better to create your own implementation of HTTP response, which is serializable. And in order for that to be serializable, just include the properties which are strictly necessary and which you can serialize. So let's do that. I will create a new Java class, and since we want to store it in database, we want to serialize it, so I will just call it material. So material is something which we can store or something like that. So material HTTP response, this implements HTTP response, and obviously we need to implement these methods. Now let's create some variables. We'll say private final in status code, and then what is the request, HTTP request. So let's store that as well. Private final string. I will just store the URL. So using the URL, we will be able to build the request. Then we need previous response. So I will just return null or optional.empty. This would implement P here, and the response P. Yeah. So I will return a empty for previous response. For headers, obviously I will store the headers. I will store the headers in a map. So let's do that. Private final map string list string headers. I will say headers map. So headers will be headers dot of headers map, and that means we want to include everything in the headers map. For request, we will just return HTTP request dot new builder. This will take the URI. So URI dot create URL dot build, and the status code will be status code. And we implemented this one. Now we need to just implement this body as well. So let's return private final t body. I will just return body here. Then we have SSL session, so I will return empty here. For URI, we can return URI dot create URL. Then we need HTTP client dot version. Let me store it. Private final and dot version, and here I will return version. Now we need these from somewhere. I will create a constructor, public response, and it will take TP response T, and I will just call it response. Now using response, we will create these 5 fields. This dot status code equal to response dot status code, URL will be response dot URI dot to string. This dot headers map will be, or we can just store the URI. Here I will just store the URI. I will just store the URI here. We will shortly update the other methods as well. Headers map will be response dot headers dot map. This dot body equal to response dot body. This dot version equal to response dot version. Now here this will be URI, and then we have this, we will just return URI. That's it. Now let's go to Redis cache HTTP proxy. Now here whenever we need to put it into cache, in that case we will say, instead of response it will be new material HTTP response, and we will provide this response here, and we don't need to change anything else, I suppose. Let's restart the application, and here send this request. Now we can see another, we are getting that error, default serializer requires a serializable payload. Now here we forward one thing, we need to implement serializable here, and I will restart the application. Go here. Okay, now we are getting the response, and X cache is miss. So if we send the request again, now this is hit, send it for 2, this is miss, for 2 hit, and let's send something else, ABCD, and it is miss. Now send for ABCD again, and now it is hit. Now let's send for 1 again, and it is hit. So it has not been 60 seconds, I guess, since it got stored into the cache. If we send this request again, it's again hit. So I'm just waiting for 60 seconds, and now it is cache miss, because it has been 60 seconds or more than 60 seconds, so the cache got expired. Now there is one last thing which we can do, is we can override another method. For example, we can override this clear method, but I'm not doing that in this video. I'm leaving that for you as an exercise, and I highly recommend you to go over these documentations. This is Spring Spring Data Redis documentation. If you want to learn more about how to use Redis in your Spring projects. That is it for this video. I hope you found this video to be useful. Please like and share this video, and subscribe to my channel. I will see you in the next one. Until then, bye.